Wicker of Babel Street. Thanks for joining me. It's great to have you here. What are the challenges that you see in integrating open source intelligence into the other types of data that organizations have and into the workflows to get the decisions out that they want to be able to make?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I think about the challenges facing the OSINT community, both inside government and with industry, I kind of bucket it into three big categories. I think there's always resource constraints. That's obviously money, manpower. So that's a big one. Policy, I think, is a huge one people probably don't talk about enough, and understanding that even though this is publicly available, widely available information, actually integrating that into the current existing workflows is a big challenge for a lot of government agencies, just because they're not used to working with data that they haven't collected, it's not part of their natural process, or in the case of the Intel community, that isn't exquisite classified information. So that's a big one. And then the third one is really about access and integration specifically. And that's really, I think, an industry challenge. It's a challenge for us. I think for a long time, OSINT providers and other people in the publicly available information space really wanted the government to come to them. Hey, we've built a platform. Hey, we have this cool widget. You should use it. And one thing that at Babel Street that we've really emphasized over the last few years is meeting the mission where it is. So don't try to make an analyst learn a new process. Don't try to make them go to 4 different tools to do 4 different things. But some people are going to want a tool. They're going to want a web interface that's really easy to use, that has a few workflow integrations. But a lot of people, they might want some sort of API integration so the data naturally flows into the existing analytical or investigative workflow. Mm-hmm. Some people are just going to want the analytics part of it. Hey, I've got my own data, but help me make sense of it. And then some people are going to say, hey, I want the data itself. I've got an interface. I've got the analytics, but I'm having a real hard time getting this particular subset of data from Russia, mm-hmm. or getting information about Syria or China in this way. And so I think it's important for the industry to be modular, to go to where the need is and the gap, and not kind of demand, well, we have a particular way of doing things. Mm-hmm. Let's try to work with government and meet them where they are.
That idea to me sounds like it syncs very well with the stated desire, at least in the military and in law enforcement organizations, of getting data to the edge. Sounds like the same idea. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, it's definitely part of that. And right, it's not having to sit in the SCIF and review it, not having to sit on a mainframe and doing it. But again, yeah, meet the mission where it is. Mm-hmm. And so if that's edge computing, if that's layering in AI processes to make it easier for someone who doesn't have a ton of time to build a complex query, let's do that. Let's make it easier. Let's make it more accessible.
Are there obstacles that the government organizations have, either intentionally or not, that make it more difficult for you and your colleagues in industry to do that?
Yes. I think some of them I've mentioned before with the policy. A lot of it, though, is kind of institutional inertia. And I think those are a lot of the challenges. If you look at background investigation, security clearances, there's a set way of doing that. And unfortunately, it's a very 20th century way of doing it. Mm-hmm. And so the modernization efforts to move that into the 21st century, to use publicly available information, to use AI, that you really have to overcome that. And so there's a level of education, a level of advocacy, I think, that has to go along with it. Mm-hmm. To overcome that institutional inertia.
The reason I ask you that question is because you mentioned policy at the beginning, and right off the top of my head, I equated policy and governance, but it sounds like what you're telling me is that they're not the same thing. They might be similar and they might be adjacent, but they're not the same thing.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely true. And I think the idea of using OSINT and publicly available information has made huge strides in the 5 years since I left government and came into industry. But I still think there's a gap in the between what we're saying and what we're doing. And I think that's narrowing, but continuing to, I think some of the policies have been put in place, but it's really about now implementing those policies and refining them even further, so that people realize OSINT is valuable, it's not radioactive, it's not lesser than other types of data.
Are there any easy steps to close that gap, or are they all pretty big rocks that somebody's got to push up a hill?
No, I think there are definitely some easy steps. I think if you look at what the Secretary of Defense is doing, trying to speed software and acquisition authorities, I think that's a great step. It helps get new tools into practitioners' hands faster. And I think if you look at how the Army, for instance, has set up the Army OSINT office, I think that's a pretty good model for the rest of the government that they can implement and tailor to their particular needs, where you're saying, hey, I'm not trying to create a one-size-fits-all solution, but I am trying to put everything in one basket and you can come and pick what you need pretty easily.
McDaniel, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining me today.
Francis, thank you so much.